in your bones now. All right. We continue from yesterday in preparation. I just mentioned the Yortzeit, 71st Yortzeit, Hilula, actually, celebration of the passing of the previous Rebbe. The sun set on Yud Shvat, the 10th day of Shvat in 1950. But then the sun arose when the Rebbe, our dear Rebbe, took the mantle of leadership, officially only a year later. Unofficially was immediately. And ever since, even after Gimel Tammuz, even after the physical passing of the Rebbe, he's still our Rebbe. And actually, this ties in very importantly the idea, because you think, the previous Rebbe passed away. The Rebbe, Gimel Tammuz happened. He's no longer physically with us. So how does that jive? How does that fit with the continuation? What does it mean our Rebbe is still the Rebbe? So you probably have to think about that. Just a thought, which we'll get to. So what we began with is, in yesterday's class, the Maimer, the Hasidic discourse that the Rebbe gave as, so to speak, the acceptance of leadership through giving the Hasidic discourse, because that's what a Rebbe does uniquely. Everybody can teach. Everybody should teach. Must teach. We all are teachers. You know why you're all teachers? Because you're all students. Everybody who's a student, ipso facto, has to become a teacher, because whatever you learn, you must share with others. So, the Rebbe is still guiding and teaching us. So, in this teachings over here of a Rebbe, though, of a Maimer, that's only something for a Rebbe to give over a Hasidic discourse. So this discourse also sets the tone, sets the path, sets the agenda of what will be in his leadership. And again, the leadership continues to this very day. So we began yesterday and with the first a few chapters, and just to repeat those few chapters, that Bosi, LeGani achoisi kala is the phrase, the opening phrase. That's how it's known, by the first words, Bosi, LeGani. You say the words Bosi, LeGani, everybody's going to look at you. Oh, you must be a Chabad Chassid. You say those words. Bosi, LeGani, I have come to my garden. The Medrash says, not only is it in reference to God coming to the garden, but it's God coming to his bridal path. A much more fancier, beautiful garden that God has come to. And that is, of course, this world. That this world is God's garden. It's not a jungle, even though what's going on in the news, boy, it definitely feels and looks like a jungle. Yes, with all the forces, with armed forces that are in the capital. Well, not the capital, Jerusalem is the capital. Because it's a jungle. Well, God doesn't look at it that way. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us, ultimately, yes, we can see that there is the aspect of the jungle, but that's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at God's garden. And what means God's garden? That God wants to make this world into a dwelling place, this low world into a dwelling place where he can be comfortable. Now, what happened? He was there in creation, in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, but through their sin, the divine presence of God God himself was removed ultimately to the seventh heaven, and then came the first. Who's the first? Avram Avinu, Abraham. He was the first, and ultimately with the seventh was Moshe Rabbeinu, was Moses, who brought down the divine presence into this world by creating a home for God, which was the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, which has the Holy of Holies and all of the other things to boot, which we'll get into some of the details. And therefore a home for God. Now, as you recall in yesterday's class, and just as a brief review, there's a phrase from the sages that say, Kol Shvin Chavivim, that all seventh are endeared. Not because there's an endearment that makes that all the things that are endeared are seven, like Shabbos, right? No, the seventh is endeared. Meaning, not because you are special that made you endeared. It's not your specialness that makes you endearing. It's because you are the seventh after the first. What does that mean? Not your choice, not because you did something great, but because you're an extension and continuing that which the first started. So Avram Avinu, what was the greatness of him? It wasn't that he personally was just such a man of God, that he had such complete self-mastery, not just of Abeinani, but of Atzadik, emotionally and intellectually had self-mastery, but because he not only called out to God as the true reality, but he made others and brought others to recognize God, that God is the true and only reality. That was his greatness. And this is what the Rebbe says that we need to continue. And the Rebbe says, we're only the seventh and, in the line. So, the divine providence has brought us to this point, so to speak. And it's not our choice, not our greatness, but greatness has been bestowed upon us that we can finish the job of finally bringing the divine presence down into this world in a real manner that the world will be able to recognize and call out and see and see that God is the only true reality. Now, in doing that, as we explained, there was something special. And what was that? That's the raison d'etre, right? That's the purpose. That's the goal. However, in that goal, there's something very important, and that is how we go about the goal. And what we explained was how we go about the goal is, what am I ready to give up myself? Where am I ready to sacrifice? Where am I ready to rise above my comfort zone? Right. And that was the idea of the Mishkan. Second. The Mishkan, the home for God, tabernacle, expresses the idea, and this we continue now from yesterday, expresses the idea that what it was made from was crushing. The mainstay of it was crushing. Crushing are planks. And those planks were made from atze shitim, which means acacia wood. That's how we translate it. But the words themselves, crushing comes from is the same letters as sheker, as lies, that we transform lies into a plank, into a home for God. That we take shitim, which comes from the word shtus, folly, foolishness, of a negative side, and we transform that into a connection to God. In other words, we all have a folly within us. What's that folly? From the animal soul that wants to lead us into a place that's not a healthy place for us to be in mind, in our thoughts, in our speech, and our actions. And what we do is that we transform that. Now, very interesting where the Rebbe takes us now. So where's that transformation going to take place? So of course, there's on many levels, many degrees where that transformation or that that we make from that which is the folly of and the foolishness that we have in us, that we now transform it into something that is beyond, that is beyond our comfort zone, beyond, even that which makes sense to us. And so the Rebbe says, particularly where this needs to be done is in Avas Yisrael, love of another. Avas Yisrael means love of another Jew. Very fascinating. In other words, it's not just about transformation of yourself, though. If you have negative thoughts, in prayers, push away those negative thoughts, of course. Your mind goes astray when you're studying now Tanya, or studying now, we're learning together, and your mind's going astray. Push that away, transform yourself, that you're focused, that you're really engaged. That's important. But that's not where the Rebbe says the point that he brings out. In particular, this is about Avas Yisrael. In other words, the transformation of us, where we, if we're capable of, or bending ourselves at least, that gives us the opportunity to rise beyond our comfort zone, to do something that gives God heavenly pleasure. Heavenly pleasure. This is the notion that the Rebbe now describes. And you know how he describes it? Through stories. And we're going to now tell over from the Mimer stories from the Rebbeim, starting with the Alter Rebbe, from the Chabad teachers, starting with the Alter Rebbe, on the idea of how they went the extra mile to be there for another in many different ways. Each story is, we could spend a lot of time on. We'll do as best as we can. And the first one is a famous one that many of you might be familiar with, and that was the Alter Rebbe on Yom Kippur. Alter Rebbe, we all know what Yom Kippur means to us. Like if there's one day you're praying, one day that you're engaged in, you're davening to connect to God, it's Yom Kippur. Not to say should be every day that way. Ultimately, every davening should be a Yom Kippur, like a Yom Kippur davening. That's how we stand before God. Okay, but be it as may. Yom Kippur, the Alter Rebbe's prayers. I can't even imagine what that means. His prayers. Just to give you an idea, the Rebbe doesn't say here, but another famous story of the Alter Rebbe was against Napoleon, that Napoleon should defeat the Russians. And somehow the Chassidim knew Rosh Hashanah, the new year is coming, and the new year brings new life and vitality into the world. There was other Hasidic Rebbes who wanted Napoleon to win and was against the Russians. And not to get into the story, the point is that what happened was whoever would blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah first, between the Karliner Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe, would get an added edge to whoever they wanted to be victorious. So the Karliner Rebbe got up very early, as he always did, prayed at the break of dawn, very quickly, in order to get to the place of blowing shofar, and blew it immediately. The Alter Rebbe also got up before dawn and made his preparations, and at the break of dawn, he didn't pray. He blew the shofar. The Karliner said, after he said the Litvak Areis gehabt, that the Alter Rebbe he Areis gehabt, I don't know how to say that in English, but he managed to succeed and win over. And in that year, the Russians defeated Napoleon. Now, that's a whole bringing in itself. But the reason I say that story, it's not a part of the Mimer here, is just to give you an idea what it means, prayers of a holy righteous individual, of a tzaddik, of a rebbe. Can't imagine what that means. It is literally about saving lives. It's literally about giving livelihood to people. It's literally about bringing new life into the world. That's everyday prayers. Yom Kippur, so Alter Rebbe is davening. All of a sudden, he leaves the shul. And we know the story because some people followed him. The Alter Rebbe was leaving the shul. Some chassidim followed him from a distance. Chutzpah, you know. The Alter Rebbe is leaving. You don't ask, but from a distance they're following. And he goes off. But he took off his talus. And he goes off to the end of town to a little hovel. And what did he do? There was a woman that just gave birth. And no one was there to take care of her. And he went and Yom Kippur, because of her needs, he cooked for her, fed her, did whatever was necessary to help her. So the Rebbe brings this as an example of what it means, is that generally things that he did. He wasn't a nurse, he wasn't, a caretaker, but he knew, obviously, heaven informed him that there's a woman that needs him. And her family was in shul, davening, and didn't know that she gave birth unexpectedly. The Alter Rebbe went. Again, for us, we say, well, of course, a woman needs help. I mean, first of all, the Alter Rebbe could have sent somebody else. He didn't have to do it. It's not something he's accustomed and knows how to do so well, probably. I wouldn't say, but I guess he does. And, I don't know if it's something to say he got out of his comfort zone. I don't know if those are appropriate words for a Rebbe exactly. But the point of it is that the Rebbe brings this in the Mimer is to bring out what it means that your personal holiness is amazing. You call out to God is amazing. That God is the only reality. That's an amazing thing. But that's not what Avram Avinu was teaching, right? What was amazing about him? He made others call out in the reality and the oneness of God, being there for another. Being there for another. The Alter Rebbe was there for another. Putting aside his own personal, sublime connection. And again, I have no idea what that means. I know it's eons beyond us, but it is what it is. So that is one story. Then he goes into the Mittler Rebbe, who is the son of the Alter Rebbe, who became the second Rebbe, and he tells a story about him is that by Yechidus, by private audience, a chassid came and was speaking about the problems and the challenges that they have and the difficulties and some of the negative things. The Mittler Rebbe picked up his sleeve and showed him, and he had like a very, I don't know if it was a scar, not a scar, but something with the skin that was like, look, this, I don't know if disease is the right word, but there was something, some blemish there. And he says to him, this is what you have done to me through your negativity, how it's affected me. A Rebbe is so connected that even in their very flesh, they're affected by those who are connected to them. Showing the bond. And he didn't do that just to make the person feel bad. He did that in order to help that person make real change. You know, think of it. We have to be honest with, I can be honest with ourselves. A lot of times we don't change for ourselves, but we'll change for another. Maybe because of the effect we have on another, that makes us recognize the negative space and place we might be in, only because of the effect we have on another. Here, the Mittler Rebbe, he didn't show it to, to be the victim. There was no victimhood over here. Look what you did to me, No, 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 no. It was actually out of a love for this person that that the negativity that you are going through and that you are sort of failing in is having an effect on the Rebbe himself. Just as the Rebbe doesn't say this here, but sometimes people wrote into the Rebbe about their things that they were going to go do and so on. And the Rebbe said, just know where you're going, because they were Hasidim and they were, connected, they were Makusha to the Rebbe. Just know that where you're going, you're taking me there too. That notion, of course, is, when you care about somebody and you're going to, sometimes you don't care about yourself so much, but someone you really care for, you don't want to take them there. You don't want to have that effect upon them. This is what the Mittler Rebbe is sharing. The Tzemach Tzedek, third Lubavitcher Rebbe, grandson of the Alter Rebbe. So he tells a story of before going to daven, and you have to understand, for a holy, righteous person, a Rebbe, what's engaged in davening, the preparation and everything, and then to be sidetracked. But as there was, a person who was in needed livelihood, and needed to be lent some money in an honorable manner. So naturally, when we're engaged in something that's important to us, so what do you tell a person that is coming to you? I know I'm guilty of this crime. You're focused on your thing. The person's coming, not that you want to help them, but you're just, you're focused on something else. So what do you do after? Got to daven now. No, there was a need, it would be taken care of, even before his own personal connection to God. The Rebbe Marash, the fourth Reb Shmuel, he tells a story that he traveled to Paris and came into a very fancy hotel because he knew there of a chassid that was there who went off the path. And the chassid wanted to stay away from him. He confronted him and said to him, Gaman, young man, know that non-kosher wine is something that affects your mind and your heart. And then he went to his room. Those words had such a profound effect on this individual that he came to his room, and he changed his ways. Eventually, he came back home. So the Rebbe bringing out over here, traveling all the way to Paris, and we're talking about, this is over 100 years ago. This is like 150 years ago. From Russia, from Lubavitch, it's just for one person to bring back home. You could accomplish a lot on your own, and you could accomplish a lot of amazing stuff. It's not about you calling out to God and your perfection. It's about the effect that you're having on another. The Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Rashab, his son, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, he tells a story. By the way, I'm telling more than the story than is in the Mimer. The Rebbe says it just like, referencing, because people know the stories. Right? Under the Tsar of Russia, there were a lot of very heavy decrees on education, on Jews, on what, particularly on education. They wanted to get them to become assimilated, and so they and the so-called Enlightenment movement was a party to this. So the Rebbe was fighting, the Rebbe Rashab was fighting Jews from within, and then the non-Jews, led by the Tsar of Russia, from without. And there was this big gathering and in Moscow. His brother told him, listen, his brother, who was very fluent in languages and in Russian, and who would probably be better fit to represent, his brother, who was the Rebbe, and that he should stay back. And also, he's a target, so to speak, because he's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He's a target. So nonetheless, the Rebbe Rashab, he went. Why? This is going to affect Jews, and I have to do whatever I can. There's nothing that can stop. And the previous Rebbe, as the Alter Rebbe says it, and previous Rebbe, everything about him was about sacrifice for another. I mean, he went to jail, and for what he had done in Russia, and that it wasn't even yet under Stalin. Stalin was afterwards, but what the communists did to try to stop him. Ultimately, he became incapacitated in a wheelchair. It doesn't say this. I'm just adding this part over here. Why? Because he wouldn't stop. Brandish a gun to him would not bring him to become fearful. And to do what he has to do for the betterment of the Jewish people. So, what is the point of these stories? Is in each and every one of them, going above and beyond. I don't know if comfort zone would be the appropriate term to use by a Rebbe, but whatever term you want to use it, right? And now he ties this in, that being that this is the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe, and a yahrzeit, a day of passing, what a day of passing is so phenomenal, because it's called histalkus. Histalkus means exaltedness. In other words, everything about that individual becomes exalted on the day of their passing. That's why we don't really call it a yahrzeit. Means is just the day of a yor means a year, zeit, a year's time since the passing. But histalkus means this exaltedness of the soul that is that occurs at this time, and as a result of that exaltedness, the Rebbe says, that gives us an empowerment, that gives us a strength, being that we're the seventh generation, and the seventh generation, that we can act like Abraham, that Abraham was the first, that he set the agenda, that the agenda is not only that we call out that God is the only reality, the only truth, but that we are disseminating that notion, that teaching, that truth to everyone that we come in contact with. But as we quoted from the Midrash, Vayikra b'shem Hashem kel olam. Avram called in the name of God, the God of God, not God of the world, but God is the world. God is the reality of the world, right? Is the way to really understand that phrase. And the Midrash says, don't say that he called out. No, he made others call out and recognize that reality. And every single one of us, it ever says, has been given the power, the strength, not because we're great, not because we've achieved, and we are individually special, and because of our specialness, we have been given something. No. But endeared we are. Endeared we are, which actually is even greater, because if you're endeared to your loved one because you cook so well, or because you make real good funny jokes, or because you are very wise, so you don't love me. You love my funny jokes. You love what I do for you. But if you're endeared to me because it's you, not because of your virtues. It's you. Everything about you is endearing as a result. Or can be, at least. It can be, potentially. And so it's not our great virtues that makes us endearing to God. It's you. You're part of a very special generation. The Rebbe says that we are going to bring back finally the divine presence of God into the world, not the way it was originally by the Garden of Eden, by Adam and Eve, which is an amazing experience that we can't even imagine. No, to something much more sublime, where God's presence will be here in a permanent manner, that it will be ultimately, bring the world to the complete redemption, where God will be truly here, comfortable, that we will be able to perceive with our naked eye the reality and the truth and the presence of God. And this is ultimately what righteous, holy people gave their lives for, as Avram did, and every successive generation. This is what they gave their lives for, and this is what we have to live for in order to give to others. Any questions? That was like a very long, no one interrupted me, no one asked me any questions. My gosh. Any comments, any questions, any thoughts? I see here on the chat, and it's on an angle that I can't read it. I don't know if that's from now. Love is to give. Okay. So, please. So, you know what I want to share with you? I know now that. What do you know from what we learned together today? Please don't be bashful. Don't be embarrassed. Tell me. You're already on the screen.
Abraham's importance.
Abraham is important, you know that. Okay, excellent. All right, Celia. Karen, what do you say?
Abraham's importance, that he brought everybody to worship and to know the one God, so that eventually what can happen is that God's presence will be in us and that we will have redemption.
Absolutely. Irma.
I know,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sarah Malka, go ahead.
I know now that we're in the seventh generation, which is a very important generation. It's the generation, and our Rebbes have given us a legacy, teachings through their lives on how we should lead our lives.
Excellent. Beautiful. Irma.
I know now that because God wants to um, have a presence again in this slow world, that we must share his love with others. We are in the seventh generation. Abraham was the first, Moses the seventh. We are also in the seventh, and we must do it through love for others and telling them about that God is the only true reality,
Excellent.
and that will help bring in the presence.
Beautiful. All right. Who else is sharing? Richard.
Know now that sometimes, like we were talking about the Rebbe story with him going to Paris and everything, how the littlest of things can make the biggest difference.
Excellent. Beautiful. Anybody else like to share? Hannah from Manchester, Linda, Denise. We have Margaret with us, and Aliyah, and whoever else. Sina. So I know now how lucky I am, and that we are, to be part of the ultimate generation that's ultimately going to transform the world. And that's why we're continue after Gimel Tammuz to be the seventh generation. Because it's not like you're going to the next. No, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses brought down the word of God at Mount Sinai. Moses brought down the divine presence of God in building the sanctuary for God. And likewise, we're the seventh, that we're going to bring that not only for the Jewish people in the desert, not only in Jerusalem, but that this will affect the entire universe, all of humanity. To such a degree will the world be transformed, as the Rebbe says, that when he was a little child, even from 3 years old, he would wonder what it would be like when Mashiach comes, that it'll be such a world that of all of the suffering that humanity has gone through, all of the terrible things that Jews have gone through, that then, as the verse says, Oitcha Avaya ki anaftabi, I will praise God because you have smitten me, that we will appreciate all of the struggles, all of the challenges, all of the pain and the suffering, personally and collectively, that we have gone through, that we will actually then see it, understand it, get it, of how it was meant to be. But that will only be in times of Mashiach. Till then, whatever pain and suffering that there's going on, we have to always be there for another. In times of Mashiach, it'll be eradicated. It'll be eradicated. There won't be any more negativity. There won't be any more klipa. There'll only be the oneness of God. And that's we have the biggest task, the greatest task. And you think about it, who are we compared to previous generations? Like we're really small potatoes. We're not even small potatoes. We're less than that. We're not such lofty souls, but That's the point. That it's not because of our achievements, personal greatness, but yet it's on our shoulders. We're midgets on the shoulders of giants. And yes, we're going to be the ones that are going to change the world and bring Mashiach and bring final redemption and bring Mashiach now. That's it, folks. Tomorrow we will we're going to learn I think I mentioned this. I don't remember where I mentioned, but I learned with my kids on Zoom, like here. And we learned a Sikha. We learn every week. So I learned a Sikha, teachings of the Rebbe. That's pretty complicated. But after we finished it, boy, we were like, we were like in seventh heaven. So I'm going to try to make it uncomplicated so we can learn it together and share it together tomorrow. Looking forward
That's
for my
wonderful.
yeshiva to continue.
Wonderful.
Sorry, Celia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Fine.
Pleasure. Thank you all for coming, especially I know some of you with kids there that are focused and learning. You guys blow me away. Oh, look at that. Aliyah's little one. That makes it
bless.
worth it all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the
Have a good
best.
day.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.